So, Henry, you're back. A lot of things have changed since we last spoke. Number one is we've merged. Like, we are under one brand, one company, Precision, and it was pretty seamless. We were working together a lot anyway. What made you finally decide, okay, you know what, we should just be one company and work together internally?
Yeah, I'm really excited to be part of this business partnership because we've known each other for a number of years. We're both sort of similar age, entrepreneurial. I think for me, what it was a very obvious decision because I'm sort of on the push side and you're on the pull side. So when we get clients who are, say, UK residents and they want to move their affairs over to the UAE, or someone looking to who's already left and wants to structure their businesses abroad, I think it just made total sense because you have two sides of the same coin. We have obviously a really good rapport with each other, and some of the clients we were working on together, even before the merger, were just really phenomenal case studies for the type of clients we can expect, specifically in the sort of crypto, those sorts of spaces. We've just been getting a lot of pipeline, and it's just been really, really seamless. And I do believe in the sum of the parts is greater than. And I really do believe that we are greater than the sum of our parts. So when we combine ourselves, it's just, the value that we can bring to our clients is a lot greater than what we could have individually done as separate businesses.
And also, I don't believe in working with people that you don't have almost psychic link to. I feel like we're both thinking the same things at the same time. And sometimes when we're talking about clients on live calls, I'll see a twitch in your face, you'll see a raise of my eyebrow, and you already know what I'm thinking. And
Yeah.
I think that that level of collaboration, you can't train, you can't teach. It's just you work well with certain people, and it's always great when you kind of join hands and work together very closely.
Yeah, that's absolutely it. Because I think we were both sort of renegades from big corporate firms. And I think what I sort of admired about you was that we both had this sort of no nonsense approach to business. And I just like this sort of the straightforwardness of our relationship. And I think when it comes to clients, a lot of them, especially with ChatGPT now, everyone sort of thinks they know what they're talking about. And I think we're the only people in the industry who seem to actually be telling people what they don't want to hear. And
Yeah.
of course, it's not always bad news, but when we talk to our clients, we don't just tell them what they want to hear, especially out here in Dubai. There's a lot of this sort of grifting going on. And I just felt like it was really hard to sort of actually know when someone actually knew what they were talking about versus if they, are just saying what everyone else is saying. So even early on, I think we were always a bit contrarian because we had that sort of unique perspective, which I think just really helped with our clients.
It was basically we wanted the luxury of saying the truth and no. And I think that that is sad that Dubai has such a yes, of course culture when in reality people just need to hear facts and given the complete presentation.
That's right. And I think also, in our industry, there's a lot, it's really hard to know if you're a client, who do you trust? Because everyone sort of looks about the same. We're sort of two youngish guys. So I think it's really hard for a client to really know what their options are when it comes to choosing a tax advisor and accountant. So we've had a lot of clients who have come from other firms who have sort of said like, wow, you're so different, you're so unique. And I think that's what I want to keep. And I think that's how we sort of bonded, because we just had this, if you like, unique selling point, which was just to be different to everyone, but also uphold certain professionalism and always have the clients, if you like, have the client front and center for all of our decisions that we make.
Speaking of being in sync, I was really busy for the past couple days. You text me on, I think, Friday night. I've booked a podcast room. We're doing it on Sunday. And I was like, well, I guess I don't have a life and I will be shooting a podcast on Sunday. And then you sent me the news, the footnotes about what was happening. And I nuked my calendar for the rest of the week. We have to talk about this. This is huge. Yeah. There's a lot going on with the UK budget. And of course, I have a billion questions that are technical mostly, but you could just give us a layman's breakdown of what's happening. So go ahead, Henry, tell us what's happening.
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, I want to thank Rachel Reeves for giving me all of this new work, because this has been a sort of gold rush at the moment with clients, specifically, obviously, people in the UK who are looking to relocate. So we've had our work cut out for us for a long time now with all of the people looking to leave. And to be honest, I think just before we talk about the budget, I think there's a misconception, especially in the UK, and this is coming from someone who's lived in the UK for a very long time, is that everyone's moving to Dubai. And that's actually not the case. A lot of people, actually, more people every year move to the US and Germany before the UAE. So that just shows you that it's not necessarily the tax that people are fed up with paying, because Germany and US aren't exactly tax havens.
Yeah.
It's just, I think there's a cultural sense that there is a lack of opportunity, there's a lack of future in the UK. So when we sort of formally joined our forces together, I noticed that that's sort of the key thing. It's not necessarily about how do I pay 0% tax. It's a case of how do I feel like I'm getting good return on investment, because most of our clients do end up paying VAT or corporation tax, which is outside the remit of personal income tax. So it's not so much the top line rate that people are fed up with paying. I think it's more the sort of what you're getting in return argument. And the UK has been, this budget that's coming up in November, people are quite fed up because they feel like everything's being sort of, the quality's getting worse, the quality of the healthcare, the quality of the National Health Service is going down, but they're paying more just to have access to it. So I think it's a really important point that people are just frankly upset with the social contract that exists in the UK. And as such, they've chosen places like Dubai, where the unofficial agreement is you don't pay much in taxes, but you do have to pay for everything else, like healthcare, you've got to pay for that. Housing, you've got to pay for it.
Or even when you start a business here, the licensing fees are X10, X12, what you'd have in most normal Western countries. But that's, say what you will, that's kind of a pay-to-play model of
Exactly.
if you want to be part of this economy, well, you're going to have to upfront some of the costs of maintaining this economy. And
exactly. And I think being a business owner specifically is a bit like choosing, a country you're going to live in is a bit like choosing which company you want to work at. So for us, it's a case of, okay, how do they treat me? What are the hours? What's the culture like? And I think, unfortunately, the UK has sort of shifted more sort of in the wrong direction towards, well, if you don't like it, you can leave. And frankly, that's what people are doing.
Didn't Keir Starmer actually say that at one point?
He did
which
say
is,
that.
if you don't like it, leave. And I remember seeing that and just, I can't believe he's actually said that.
I couldn't believe that was at the Labour Party conference about a month ago, and it was insane. It was basically telling your people like us who can basically work anywhere, you're telling them to leave.
Not just that, we're self-employed. We have complete control over every facet of our lives. In fact, we have control over other people's lives to a certain extent towards how they work. And you're telling kind of this entrepreneurial class, this merchant class, of saying, well, at the end of the day, I can tell you what you can't do. First, like, I'm a hothead. I have very low tolerance for things that aren't going well or not working my way. Now, imagine paying someone to tell you that you're going to do things my way or this way, even when they're not working well. So
yeah. And I think, to be honest, I think it's not just a UK problem. I think we're seeing that in other parts of the world too. But the UK is unique in the sense that it's the first country to sort of overtly say that. And you've got countries like, not even the UAE, but countries like Thailand or Indonesia that are trying to bring people there, digital nomads, people like us. And those countries are opening the doors to these immigrants, and they're saying, come here, spend your money, we won't tax you. Whereas the UK is taking the opposite approach, which is, come here, we're going to tax you, and also we're going to make it very difficult for you to relocate here.
Also, this is just the first wave of freedom hitting the entrepreneurs that can work everywhere. I've provided that extension secondarily to all people that work with us as well, saying work from anywhere, do anything at any time, just make sure the work's done. Now, the first layer is the entrepreneurial class, then comes the white collar class. Now you're looking at a mass exodus.
Yes.
People making just, anywhere from 50,000 pounds to 100,000 to 150, which is fairly average. What if those people are going to go to, if you don't like it, leave, and they can? Then what are you going to do with your budget? There's going to be no inflow for you to keep up this ludicrous amount that you're demanding from the public.
That's exactly right. And I also think that borders, specifically in this post-COVID environment, borders are just becoming less of a thing. So you can basically, as we saw in COVID, you could work from home. And I think that's been the biggest, if you like, challenge to the government is how do you deal with this new dynamic? Because before, people used to work in offices, in factories, on farms, and those people couldn't move. So now we're in this position where people like us can work anywhere. So I feel like for the government and in the UK, they need to do more to try and incentivize people to stay, which is lower taxes, higher quality of life, maybe certain sort of perks, benefits. One of the controversial things that I think if you are an additional rate taxpayer in the UK, you should be able to drive in bus lanes, not because, that's necessarily the sort of, if you like, the fastest mode of transport, but just to give you something to just make you feel like you're getting something in return. But that's more of a, reward system, which I don't think the Labour government are in any mood to talk about.
And when you just siphon money from the public in endless, loop without any sort of consequence or kind of, if you don't have to live with the consequences of your bad budgetary decisions, then you can pretty much almost get a little out of touch of the risk reward. If there's no negative impact to you and it just hits the country, then why wouldn't you? Or why, of course, these people are encouraged to make the worst or most politically positive decision possible. So
exactly. And I think just to round it off, I think the Labour government have just not made it clear what their priorities are. So the reason why Keir Starmer is the least popular prime minister we've had in a very long time is because no one really knows where he sits on the fence on certain hot button issues. I mean, for example, it's not even just about, Israel, Gaza. It's more about, okay, we're going to raise taxes, but we're only going to raise it on certain people, or we're only going to do, and I think what they're sort of doing is trying to navigate this sort of, we're trying to not sit on certain side of the argument because we don't want to piss off the other side of the argument. And I just feel like it's the completely wrong move. We need to be, I have more respect for politicians from over a decade ago who said, look, it's going to be bad, but we're going to fix this issue. This is our problem. We have an inflation problem. We have an unemployment problem, but these are the things we're going to do to fix it. And it will suck in the short term, but we're going to get over this and we're going to solve it. Whereas the UK kind of doesn't want to admit it's going to be bad, but also not going to do the sort of positive responses that one would expect to resolve these issues.
And that's what's really missing is fence sitting and not taking a stand. You just and you don't need to see that this breed of politician is gone. You could look in Asia when the tariffs were being implemented on Singapore. The leader of Singapore, I believe is the prime minister there, he took a state of address addressing the impact on the economy, what's going to happen, a very real, mature response, talking to your citizens of your country in a very responsible manner, saying it's outwardly negative, this is how it's going to happen. And he didn't even put a positive spin on it. He just said, this is all bad, we're going to have to come together and work through this and figure out a solution. And it's a very mature way of dealing with global economics, politics. You need to keep things realistic, real, and honest. And unfortunately, that's not happening.
It's not happening. But also, you think about what the job of a CEO is. So when you run a company, your job is to communicate what the vision is. Tim Cook is not getting involved in small design processes in the same way maybe Steve Jobs would have. But the fundamental job is to show the vision. And I think what we're seeing right now is not a lack of vision. And, we don't expect there to be always, 100% consistency in terms of, yes, sometimes they move their vision in lines with the times. But at the end of the day, it's about being just clear with what you're going to do. And I think that lack of clarity is what causes businesses like mine to leave the UK because we're just, well, I don't know what the vision is and I don't know what I'm going to be doing 5 years from now. So I'm just going to leave and move somewhere a bit more certain and a bit more clear about where they're going to be. And the UAE, from my understanding, has been very clear about where they sit. On certain issues, specifically around taxation, crime, and all those things. They're very clear about what the social contract is here.
And of course, we're based out of the UAE and we are pro UAE, but this is a clear example that it isn't just the UAE. They will
Yeah,
go literally anywhere where they're treated with some semblance of certainty and with a more balanced relationship.
exactly.
I was shocked when you told me Germany. Germany has some of the highest taxes.
Yeah.
Some of the highest taxes, some of the most stringent regulation, but it just goes to show when you have a clear direction, a clear vision,
Yeah.
people will pay more just for certainty. It's coming at a premium these days.
Yeah, and I don't want to, I'm not. This is not a political talk show, but I think it's just very clear that even as a optimist, and I think all entrepreneurs are optimists. I think that there's no such thing as a pessimistic entrepreneur. Otherwise, you'd just be working, 9 to 5 at some company with, you wouldn't be trying to change things. So for us, I think the biggest thing is how do we communicate that to our client, because our client base are very varied and they have lots of different needs. But for a lot of people, they sort of just see Dubai or the UAE specifically as just as a leap pad for future. You just come here, work it out, and then you go somewhere else. So you might decide after a few years of staying here, you've had your fun, you've done your time here, and then they leave. So I think the UAE sort of does have its own problems, but I don't think they're the same sort of problems that the UK has, where it's more of an end destination that people are just moving to with no intention of leaving, whereas here it's quite transient. So people come and go, businesses come and go. So it's important. And for someone like you, who's been here your whole life, basically, it's good to see that sort of natural progression of, someone who's actually been here a long time and isn't just going to run away or change to a different country, for example.
It is becoming a trend among GCC kids that may have secondary nationalities that aren't exactly from this country, but are born and raised here, know the country like the back of their hands. They're really capitalizing on the fact of their kind of home ground advantage of knowing how everything works, how functions, mindsets. And what's interesting is that our client base is incredibly diverse. We probably deal with 50 plus nationalities at any one time. And it really gives you the advantage of being able to conduct business anywhere at any time due to you not following the norms of any one culture or country. So it is pretty advantageous to be in part of this part of the world. And you can see a lot of growth coming in the future. But we're not here to talk about the UAE right now. It's all going to be about the UK. This is going to be a UK first podcast. So the first thing that's changed is the rules for the non-DOMs and how they're going to be categorized, how they're going to be taxed. Explain to me the changes of what's really happening here.
Yeah, so I think to put it simply, this upset a lot of people because the UK has been really good at attracting wealthy people to live for lifestyle reasons. And what was happening is these non-domiciled people, so basically, to oversimplify, people whose parents aren't originally from the UK, and these people could basically live tax-free for a period of time in the UK. Basically, they only pay tax on what they bring into the country. So what's changed is that they've gotten rid of it. And actually, it wasn't Labour that got rid of it. It was actually the Conservatives. This whole concept of domicile just doesn't exist anymore. And domicile was important because it essentially meant that if your plan was, say, take you, for example, if you wanted to move to the UK for a few years, live in London, have a nice life, or maybe raise your family, you could then leave the country again, go back to where you came from, and not pay very much in UK tax. Of course, they're still paying indirect taxes like VAT, all of those sorts of things. And the problem is that we had a lot of clients who were on this regime of not paying tax, and now they have to pay tax on their worldwide income. So these people, it's not so much most people don't mind paying a bit of tax. And if you're American, for example, there's a lot of Americans in the UK. They're already paying tax in the US. So it wasn't sort of new to them that they're now having to pay tax when they otherwise wouldn't have. But what was new was the cultural shift. And for a lot of people, we've helped them leave the UK because they basically now have to pay tax. And it was becoming not unaffordable, but it was just becoming increasingly more challenging for them to justify being in the UK because now they didn't have this tax benefit, and now they don't have the benefit of that certainty that this is going to remain in place. So the non-dom regime doesn't exist anymore. and there isn't such thing. So for inheritance tax as well, that's really important. Actually, there's some good news in this, so it's not all bad news. The good news is for people like myself who have a UK domicile, we can actually break that UK domicile. So whereas before it would have been very difficult to do that. So we've shifted over to this new residence base of if inheritance tax for the domicile regime to replace it. And that has been obviously a cause of a lot of concern for our clients, specifically the wealthy ones who have moved to the UK looking to claim this relief.
So if they change their residency currently, they could potentially break their inheritance tax, or is that the case?
Correct. So for people like me who had a UK domicile before under the old rules, well, now that I don't live in the UK anymore, I can basically, after a certain number of years, about 10 years for someone like me, I can no longer pay inheritance tax. And that's under the current rules. But of course, then, the natural question here is, well, okay, sure. So I have to wait 10 years. What if a new government comes in and then they change it back to the old system? Then I'm back in the inheritance tax remit. So this is a problem with certainty. And right now, all I can say is it's just better to not be in the UK, because we can assume under these rules, if the rules do change again, there'll be some sort of grandfathering provision to help those people who are under the old rules. Because right now it's so uncertain whether or not, when I die, am I going to be paying inheritance tax in the UK or not? Well, we don't know.
And that's the issue, is that, okay, let's just say that you're accumulating assets now, you will over your life, you want it to not be in pay inheritance tax, and then the rules go back and forth. You just scrap the idea of building your wealth in the UK entirely, or having them take part of any part of the taxes you'd pay, because of the lack of certainty, not because of the tax rate of how much you're paying. You just don't know what's going to happen, period. It's not a percentage question. It's a what will happen question.
Exactly. And there's a classic sort of joke in the tax industry that inheritance tax is an optional tax. So basically, it's very easy to get it down to zero. Of course, that does require some advice and that requires some changes, but it is possible to get it to zero. But all of that depends on which rules operate. So if we don't even know which rules are going to be applicable, then it's no longer an optional tax. It's going to be very difficult to sort of quantitate what you're going to pay in terms of tax if we don't even know what the rules are going to be 10 years from now, or even 5 years from now.
It's almost worse than a casino, because at least at a casino, you know your chances, even if they're slim.
Yeah, that's right. And inheritance tax, there is no shortcuts. If you're going to, if you're a client and you're looking to reduce your inheritance tax within the next year, probably not going to work. But if you're looking at the next 10 years, we can do something. So it's sort of a long-term, longitudinal approach. But a lot of our clients obviously don't really want to wait 10 years. So we have to be very frank and very transparent about this is a long-term approach, and we're not just going to save you, millions of pounds in tax overnight. This is going to take a while, and it doesn't help that the government are not giving us any certainty that, or quite frankly, faith that they're going to keep it this way.
So for inheritance tax, that was mostly pertaining to individuals and the wealth that they're passing down. How does this pass down to businesses, people that own large swaths of land, farmers, agriculture, maybe manufacturing potentially? How does that impact them with this new inheritance regime?
Yeah, so under the old rules, if you owned let's say a business, and it was worth maybe £10 million, and by the way, that business is very hard to value, because naturally businesses inherently, if they're not listed on a public exchange, they're only worth what someone's willing to pay for them. So to sort of get around that issue of value, the government introduced this exemption that says if you're a trading business in the UK, provided you don't hold predominantly assets or cash or something like that, then you can basically entirely exempt the business from inheritance tax. So it doesn't matter if your business is worth £10 million or £100 million, it would be completely exempt under something called business property relief. Now, there were certain exceptions, and there's obviously you don't get that if you're just an investment company, you invest in crypto, for example. And now there's a cap which has been introduced. It's about £1 million and £2 million if you're married. And that's now a problem, because suddenly it's not so much, again, the paying the tax problem, it's the value question, which is, well, what is your business worth? And HMRC have something called the district valuer, which is this basically government agency that appoints someone like a chartered surveyor who values your business. So you might think your business is only worth 100 grand, but they may say it's worth £1 million. And before that never really mattered, but now it does, because if you're above that £1 million threshold, if you're single, £2 million if you're married, suddenly your business can be subject to inheritance tax. And this is never happened before. This is crazy that you could basically have to pay inheritance tax by passing your business on to your next generation. And who's going to front the liquidity? Where are you going to get the money for that? Because if your business is hiring people, or if you're a farmer, where are you going to get the liquidity to pay
And
this tax?
we've seen examples of businesses just being liquidated from not affording the inheritance tax. I think certain parts of the U.S. tried this before scrapping it completely. And it's kind of frustrating seeing ideas that not work in the past being re-implemented. And on top of that, will we be able to contest the evaluations? Is this a giant, was the
inside
surveyor
job.
market lobbying the government to
Oh,
make sure that they were getting their billables?
Well, this is the problem, is that it's all basically, and I think this is where government overreach comes in, because I think you can dispute it and you can obviously argue it, but this is all, you're bearing in mind you're dealing with a death, so you're dealing with bereavement issues, and you have all of these other problems to resolve, like funeral arrangements, grieving, all of that. And on top of all of that, you have to get into an argument with HMRC over what you think your value of your estate is. So I think it's just one of those really, really unsensible policy decisions that and by the way, inheritance tax actually raises about the same money as tobacco and fuel duties. So you just think, well, we're not really bringing in a lot of money here. And on top of all of that, we're just annoying a whole bunch of people. So I just think it's just a very, very sort of losing argument to go down this sort of taxing dead people approach. I just think politically, if they got rid of that and just raised income tax by 1 percentage point, I think you'll find people are actually happier. And
keep in mind, the people that would know best what your business is worth are now dead. It would be the business owner themselves.
Exactly.
If, we both married very educated, very smart women, but do they understand what we do to the primary details?
Exactly. And
they wouldn't know, forget, they would essentially be uselessly distraught for a couple of months. And on top of that, they need to figure out what our businesses would be worth individually, which would already be so difficult because of them not understanding the revenue. They wouldn't understand anything, really.
Imagine if someone tried to buy your business, but you weren't there. You are, if you like, especially for small businesses, medium businesses, all of those, what we call owner-managed businesses. So we run the business, but if you couldn't just hire someone to replace us, or it'd be very difficult too, because the company has so much intrinsic value to the owner. And I think that basically doesn't get looked at in these new rules. So you're basically valuing the company based on when you were alive, but after you die, the company is going to be worth, a fraction of what it was before.
And hypothetically, you could maybe hire an independent evaluator alongside your will to close out that loop, but it's not like they've been given any clarity on that's what you should do or not. It's just, when you're dead, we're going to tell you how much you got to pay us and you better pony up or sell it off. What if you sell the business and then give them all the money? Doesn't that contradict the very statement of what the business is worth?
Exactly. And what will happen is, obviously, if our partners were trying to raise capital to front the tax, they would have to sell it to a bigger organization. So the only people who are going to win are the people who can buy pennies on the dollar companies, because they understand that, you need the liquidity, so it's like a fire sale. You will sell the business, and that doesn't help with the whole, combating big business, because the big business people are the only ones who have liquidity to then buy the businesses.
And if I think our spouses know us pretty well, is that we rather let it burn to the ground than sell it to big business, which we just left. So it's more monopolistic. You're putting small businesses in this position where, when you die, it's not even like the employees can take over. There's like a restructuring. It's pay us this much for inheritance. If you can't pay it, sell it to one of the big players in the market that you just spent your whole life
yeah, competing with.
competing
Yeah.
with, and then even if it says on the will, well, burn it to the ground if
Yeah.
if you sell it to these guys. I don't know how much of that would be upheld. Would they let you burn it to the ground? Will you get taxed for burning it to the ground? It's so confusing.
It really is. And I think ultimately it's about, and this is where as a tax advisor, we can do something to try and structure it in a way that does result in you having your wishes. Because it's no longer, a lot of people have either wills that are old or don't really know anything about inheritance. So when someone dies, they tend to, at that point, start cleaning up house. They start looking at all of these things, because I think what the problem is that when you're running a business, you don't really have time to think about these things. So we do encourage our clients to obviously talk to us about these things and try and get these plans in place early, succession plans, so that we can reduce the tax bill, but also allow for the succession to take place in a measured way. Because personally, I don't think many people, many business owners actually know what a shareholders agreement is, or they even know what a power of attorney is. I mean, these are all words that you've probably heard before, but it's these types of things that will dictate what happens when you die, what happens to your business when you die, what happens to your board of directors, and all of those things are really things you should be looking at whilst you're alive and not waiting until someone dies.
And this covers such a wide span of businesses. First, like we live and breathe this stuff, and we don't exactly know what's gonna happen moving forward. Now, imagine if your business was, I don't know, the world's best tennis rackets. How are you supposed to conceptualize and explain? He'd have to potentially hire people like us to explain it to him, only to hear, we don't know. We just think, and then it leaves us in an awkward position where we don't want to suggest that they should pack up and leave, but they say it's our,
It's a natural conclusion.
it's our obligation of saying these are all your options. We
Yeah.
don't know. Pack up shop and move,
Yep.
or I don't know, sell it today and then just
Yeah.
retire immediately, which is.
And I think everyone got mad at Mr. Dyson when he left the UK after Brexit. And I think it was all just this sort of, I think businesses have to think in 10, 20-year horizons. And none of this is, the best time to speak, I like to say this to my clients, the best time to speak to a tax advisor was probably a year ago, because things have changed a lot, but also there are certain things that you can't do now. And a big one being certain offshoring. So there are certain ways we can move assets overseas, but if you're a UK resident, you're sort of in for a tough bargain, because a lot of your assets cannot be, from an inheritance tax perspective, moved tax efficiently overseas. That just doesn't work anymore. And it hasn't worked for a number of years, but people like to sort of think it still does. So I think it's not even just about presenting the options, it's about giving them up-to-date information, because a lot of people have information that's 5 years old, and that's as good as old news, because there's no way you can make a serious business decision or a financial decision if you're operating on information that's out of date.
And I think that no one's really thinking about, right now the conversation is, how do we get out, or how do we navigate this? But a secondary question that no one's talking about is, why even begin building?
Yes.
And then where are your tax revenues from the future going to come from if the people that have a desire to start these businesses and continue don't want to even enter a broken framework?
Yeah.
And you could choose to enter the UK market through third parties that are already dealing with this issue. They don't want to compete directly. It's leading to more monopolization of certain industries or businesses within an established framework. It's becoming less competitive, less free market, and more dangerous for anyone to even try anything new. So what are those businesses going to do that are monopolized? They're going to gouge the consumers. They're going to put pressure on the politicians to enrich themselves. Story as old as time.
It never works.
And it never works. Eventually, it'll crumble away, and then you build anew, and then it happens all over again.
That's right.
I think that's what's the sad part, is that we are no longer living in the age of ignorance. We can go back 100, 200, 300, 500. I could talk about hyperinflation and Roman coins all day, every day, but I think that people need to be more outspoken. They need to be more educated on what's happening, just so they could speak out and maybe change course.
Yeah, and I think just to sort of round off the conversation, I'm really positive about the future in terms of what we can do as entrepreneurs, but I'm just more I guess you could say, pessimistic about how the UK is going to go about attracting the right talent. Because as we know, I think a business is only as good as its people. And for small businesses, it's always great to have as many talented people. And I think that's what the UAE has done really well at, is bring in just a lot of talented people and a lot of small businesses. Because I think small businesses are the ones that drive innovation. Yes, you could argue that big businesses bring on some really big, seismic products to the market, but at the end of the day, it's the small businesses that are going to give you the most competitive price for the really high quality service, especially in our industry.
And it's not unusual for big businesses to buy out small businesses through acquisitions and then integrate those innovations into their product or service line.
Yeah.
Sure, those small businesses have cashed out their IP and made a bunch of money, but at the end of the day, it led to your core product being implemented. Otherwise, those things would have never been invented. Some would argue that the way forward is for individual businesses to create something interesting, sell it to someone bigger, and then that could be a new way of trickle down economics in its own way.
And the countries that are set up to benefit from that are the ones that make it easier, not harder, to attract talent, to open a business. I mean, I was so impressed when I moved here, how easy it was to get things done. And you look at the UK, I mean, to get a visa can take 6 months just to get a visa to the UK. And then even if you get the visa, you're tied to your employment. So you can't go off and start a business. You can't. And I just find that whole philosophy just completely wrong, because we are living, breathing examples of what can happen when you're basically untethered, when you're able to start a business because you think you have a good idea. And of course, not all businesses succeed, but just having the opportunity to do that in an environment that rewards that, I think is the right thing to do, not to penalize those people and say, oh, you're greedy capitalists, you should pay more tax. That's just not fair, because we are creating jobs, but also we're creating opportunities for people to get a better service and a better price.
And the worst places to work traditionally have been large corporations where they hold a lot of leverage over employees.
Exactly.
I consider the happiness of everyone that works with us very personally. I think it's a top priority, and a lot of small businesses have the most content employees with the best benefits at times.
Yes, 100%. And that's why, you and I, we have this growth plan where we see what the future looks like. And it's not just to be bought out by a big accountancy firm, big tax firm. It's to sort of hit the, if you like, the maximum efficiency per person without creating becoming the system that you were fighting against. So I think it's important for any business partnership, but specifically in our industry, to be very realistic about what you want, because I think there's a genuine desire for us to keep nimble and to satisfy our clients in the best possible way without growing to become the if you like the
monster that we let. Yeah, oh my god. So recently, we've worked on a number of crypto cases together, and I think that this new budget and these changes in laws are very relevant to that case. So can you explain to everyone about what we're doing about that now and what the situation is?
Yeah, so obviously the crypto markets haven't been great in the last few years, but what's really interesting is that we're seeing a lot of people who are trying to crystallize their crypto assets abroad. So they're effectively looking to leave the UK to sell their assets for tax reasons. So it is possible to do it, subject to certain conditions. So you've got to, for example, break your tax residence in the UK. You've got to form a tax residence somewhere else. You've got to then, there's a certain step-by-step process you've got to do in order to make that dream become a reality. But what's happened is that people are making a lot of missteps. And I think, unfortunately, as well, people think that crypto is this great decentralized asset and the government has no overreach over those assets. That's actually not the case. And in the UK, where I'm from, people are, every single wallet provider, every single person that allows you to hold crypto has to register by law with the government to show that you are someone who holds these assets, and they have to report those transactions to HMRC. So even if you think you have a Binance wallet that isn't linked to any sort of UK government agencies, you're wrong. It's actually going to be reported over to HMRC. So what we've had is recently a client who sold, I think it must have been about £6 or £7 million worth of these crypto assets, and they effectively triggered an inquiry from HMRC because they said, well, hang on, 1 minute you're here paying taxes, next minute you're not here, and suddenly you've just sold these you just made these large distributions from your wallet. What's going on? Of course, as far as they're concerned, that's a completely valid question because they don't know what your resident situation is. They don't know that you have gone abroad. They don't know. All they see is your tax return. And the tax return might be a year old by that point. So we had this client and we had to basically tell HMRC that this is the situation. They left the UK, they're no longer resident. And all of this took, 6 to 8 weeks to resolve. It did eventually get sorted out, but I think for a lot of people, they think it's just as simple as, well, I can sell my assets, move abroad. And that is sort of the case, but you've got to be very
meticulous,
very meticulous about the process, because even if you're in the right, HMRC will still probably ask you questions because they're very desperate.
We kind of plan these off ramps or these kind of reporting about 8 months in advance is what we generally request for. And most of the time they come up to us saying, okay, we've already solved it.
Yeah.
Like, what are we doing now?
Shoot first, ask questions later.
And then, of course, we kind of have to, scrap together a plan or kind of keep in mind, no inquiry has been launched as of yet, but we're already on red alert on what's going to happen next.
Yeah, and I think it's the key thing to bear in mind if you're a crypto investor looking to sell or looking to leave the UK to crystallize your assets, you need to be very mindful about what is your tax situation in the country you're leaving and what is the tax situation going to be in the country you're arriving in. And this goes back to the pull and push factors that you need to have both sides of the equation sorted out, because HMRC, by the way, when they inquire into you, they don't just say, what are your days in the UK? What is your residence? They want to know, where's your accounts for this business? That even it might be in the UAE, they want to see the accounts and they want to see documents relating to your tax residence in that country. So they don't just care about the UK. When HMRC asks questions, they're looking at other things and other businesses outside their usual remit. And it's just important to be mindful of that, because if your accountant in the UAE hasn't been filing your tax returns or your accounts for your business, then you're going to be in for a world of pain with HMRC.
We try to have the answers ready before the questions even crop up. So I guess with everything that's going on, what's the next trend line? Where are taxes going to get higher? Are they going to get lower? Where do you foresee what's going to happen in the UK?
Yeah, so this is a bit of a hot take, but taxes will go up even if the rates themselves stay the same. So what that means is there's something called stealth taxes. So every year, the threshold. So for example, if you make £100,000 a year and next year you make £100,000 a year, well, in real terms, your money has gone down because inflation's a thing. The purchasing power of your money has basically eroded the value of your money. And the same is also true with taxes. So if you're earning £100,000 a year, next year you're going to be paying more in taxes because the thresholds stay the same. So inflation is basically meaning that the bands are higher than or rather sort of lower. So you're paying more tax than what you would have paid if they were linked to inflation. So taxes will go up, but they'll do it in a very sneaky way that you may not notice. And I think this goes back to, I saw a really good quote, which is taxes in the UK are at the highest they've been since World War II. And we're not living in World War II conditions, despite what people think. And what's happened is we're paying more in taxes, but it was a sort of slow boil. And it was, we've not really noticed. We're not seeing, oh, my tax rate's gone up 5% next year. It's the same it was last year, but you're paying more because as a percentage of your earnings, you're paying more. So it's really important to bear in mind that taxes will continue to go up, but maybe not in the way that you would probably expect. And also national insurance, which isn't technically a tax, it's more like a social security contribution. They're going to increase the remit of that to, for example, your rental profits. So if you have a rental property, if you rent it out, they might bring that into the remit.
Which is insane. Like, what does my rental property have to do with how much insurance or rental insurance
it's a tax rise. It's just a tax rise at the end of the day, but they're doing it in a sneaky way. So I'm against it because HMRC, just from core principles, HMRC treats rental properties as passive income, more like an investment rather than an earned source. So you only tend to pay national insurance on earned income, like your salary or self-employment, something like that. So what they're effectively doing is saying you're now earning this money as if you were trading hours for money, but in other areas of the legislation, they treat it like an investment. So they need to, again, just pick a lane and decide that that's what they're going to stick with.
Well, it isn't all doom and gloom. I think there's definitely still some positives in the UK. So I mean, let's kind of go through like a pros and cons list on what do you think is still good about the UK, what do you think is the overall negative, so that people can make a more balanced decision.
Yeah, I think the major pros for the UK, and this is something I've spoken to you about sort of off the pod, about the faith in the system and the sort of belief in our institutions, because I do think the UK is a really good. So I never had this problem. So in the UAE, clients want to meet you face to face,
Yes.
or they want to see where you live, they want to see your certificates. That doesn't tend to be a problem in the UK because we have quite strong institutions. You know, if I say I'm a chartered tax advisor, you can look me up online, find my name, no problem. But here it's a bit more, there's that lack of trust. And I don't think that's inherently a bad thing, but I do find I'm questioning a lot more about my professional qualifications than I've ever been in the UK. So I think the UK does have that. We tend to believe what people say, and we tend to have these validation methods like Companies House. You can look on Companies House if someone's a business. So that, for me, I took for granted. And now I realize that that's not something that's universal in other parts of the world. Another pro I would say with the UK is just I think there's a really strong, if you live in London where I lived, there is a really good network effect where you can meet some really great people there. So you could be a lawyer, you could be a tax advisor, an accountant. Basically, everyone's just there. And it doesn't matter if you're a business owner or not, you can make some really good connections. So I think the networking opportunities in London are pretty good, and people there aren't just there for a quick buck. I mean, that's something, again, other parts of the world, you know, there's a lot of this, what can you do for me? How much money can I get out of this relationship? I think in the UK, there's a bit more of that camaraderie, little bit more of that human element, which people want to sort of connect on maybe a more deeper level than just how much money can you make me in the short term, and how can I capitalize on this relationship in the next 6 months. So I've noticed that the people in London, again, I still love it. It's my favorite city in the world. I still think that there's something to be said for the quality of the networking opportunities and the professionalism that exists there.
And the cons, what are the negatives now looking forward?
Yeah, I mean, it wouldn't be a fair argument if we didn't talk about crime. I think crime is a big problem. And I think, again, this crime I've never been a victim of theft, but it's the psychological toll that it takes on you. So in Dubai, you know, oftentimes, in fact, today, I just left my tablet, my phone, I just leave on the table, go to the toilet. Nothing's going to happen. And I don't even have to, and the thing is, if I did that in London, nothing might happen. It might be totally fine, but it's the psychology. It's the sort of, what if something happened? That would be very catastrophic. So I think the crime, it's become more of a psychological phenomenon where people believe that it's going to happen to them. And then that sort of drives a certain behavior, that drives a certain fear. So I think the crime has been a big problem. And just the lack of investing in infrastructure. I mean, the infrastructure's fallen apart. I think that, unfortunately, we've had a few, shall we say, we've had a few challenging years of austerity, and you can really see it because the infrastructure is crumbling. You know, hospitals, the railways, everything's sort of degrading a lot faster than other parts of the world because we just haven't invested in infrastructure.
Yeah, it's really sad to see because I think a lot of people are becoming more nationalistic in its own way and perceiving as kind of this global competition of one country being better than the other. I think that's really silly. I don't think that it's a binary thing. I think that as when we were children, we saw a lot of like examples of the future of everyone having a good standard of living, every country being kind of modernized and well connected, and globalism leading to shared wealth. And it's sad to see, I have no stake in this. The UK either improving or not improving doesn't change my life, but it's still sad to see a country that was so, looked up towards progress and innovation at a time being regressing in its own way. And I honestly never thought that I'd see it happen. So
and I just want to quickly say I'm proud to be British. I think the UK has a really good history. And one sort of good example I like to say is that if you look at, we're the invention of common law, we have the invention of basically rights, human rights exist because of the Magna Carta. And you just think these are all things to be proud of. And I think it's upsetting that the country that you're so proud of, it has become the way it is now. So I don't think it's necessarily a contradiction. You can be proud of your country and not live in your country. Because a lot of people say, well, if you like your country, you should stay and fight. No, I think you should go and do what's best for you and your family. And then you can still be proud of where you came from, but it doesn't mean you're sort of forced into that contract with that country.
On top of that, if you don't almost react to the country going in a negative direction, you don't want to contribute towards it either. So maybe this is the only thing people can do, is saying, okay, you want us to leave?
Vote
we'll
with
leave.
your feet.
Yeah, we'll vote with our feet. When things get better, we'll come back, and we'll be happy to come back. And
exactly. And maybe that might be my situation. I might come back 5-10 years back to London and say, okay, well, prices are a lot cheaper now. But, I think the most important thing you can do is vote with your feet. And if you're not happy with a regime or set of systems, you should leave. There's no point staying. Imagine just staying in that country and just being miserable the whole time.
And that goes the same for basically me being born and raised in the UAE. If they implement certain factors, there'd be a lot of expats that would leave in the drop of the hat, and that's just how things are. So let's just hope for better in the future. Wherever progress lies, we'll probably go that direction. And at the end, it's nothing personal. You just got to take care of yourself and your family first.
Yeah, it's just good business.
All right.